Episode 181, Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome here. My name's Jeremy. I'm hosting today's conversation. Today's interview, it might be a little bit of a back and forth because I've got Sid Coop from our team here. Sid, how you doing?
Yeah, so good, Jared. Good to be with you on the podcast, bro. Love it.
Yeah, if people are listening to this live, obviously we're kicking off 2023. This conversation is really bringing us back to some real good, strong, basic questions, and not basic in like a low intellectual level basic. It's like, no. This is the ground level of youth ministry, foundational. Really, when we talk to youth workers across the country, we know the work you do matters, but the work you do sometimes can be complex, can be challenging, and we want to answer the real practical questions that you wrestle with on a week-to-week basis. But before we get into that, Sid, this is a great time to be a youth worker because there are so many organizations in our country of Canada and even beyond that are around to support and make sure that you've got what you need as a volunteer youth worker. And in particular, the whole idea of online events and being able to bring great, incredible communicators right in front of your students. I'm so stoked by this. So fill people in on what's going on with Change Conference and how people can access that.
Yeah, so Jay, here's what's amazing. As youth workers, you get to be in person with your kids face to face, and you know how important that is. We all know how important that is. But what's fantastic is, like Jerry, you said, there's such great online content that can help facilitate that relationship and give you a way to do like deeper formation with your kids in terms of loving Jesus, loving others. So we love what Youth Unlimited is doing with the Change Conference. Our friends Olivia and Joe, who run the Change Conference, are just fantastic. And they've got an online conference happening on February 24th. They got some great guests as part of their online content. Lecrae is there. By the way, Jer, I'm a Lecrae guy.
Are you a big Lecrae fan?
I remember his first album that dropped, Rebel, and I was like on it, like so on it. My boys were on it, so good. So
I thought you were just joking. That's good.
No, I'm not even joking one bit. Yeah, I know. It's hard to imagine. And then Maddie Pruitt's going to be there, so she's delivering some insight. We love what they do. Anyways, you got to go to their website, changeconference.com, access it. You could use that as a watch party. You could jump on board and just download the assets and use it with your kids, I think, as you see fit. So we just love what Change is doing. It's free. It's really good content. You got to access it. And of course, Change does a fall conference as well. They're so serious about sharing Jesus with the next generation and helping the next generation grow in the ability to share Jesus with others. We really appreciate what Change is doing. We love the work that they do, Jer.
Yeah, and in this stretch, there's other events too. And so depending if you want to go see things in person and bring a group, if you're in the GTA, we got Today's Teens. We'll drop the link in there. You can bring your students to that one. We're obviously running events for volunteer youth workers, for youth ministries. So we've got the link in the show notes for that if you want to come and get trained. And then the other partner we've got in the season, Briarcrest, they've got Youthquake, which is actually both, again, an in-person event that's this season, and then also an online option as well. And so we'll link them.
Yeah, and let me just talk about that for a second. Hey, Youthquake has just shifted. They do online content that you can access in February as well. Fantastic for your youth ministry. But they do a junior high conference and a senior high conference in the spring, end of April, beginning of May. And especially if you're in the prairies, you're looking for a place to bring your students. They can get in good housing right there and just have a really immersive experience that you get to have with them, which is fantastic. So we love the work that Caitlin is doing at Briarcrest with her event called Youthquake, and you got to check it out. By the way, Jer, I'm pretty excited about it. We have a contract with Green Bay Bible Camp. We love working with them. And we're actually going to take our lead team over to Youthquake at the very beginning of our time together. Yeah, to have that shared experience as well. So we're pretty excited about that.
Very good. So lots of events, lots of things in the show notes. Check it out. But let's jump into today's conversation all about students that might be bad influences. Let's check it out.
Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, everybody. This question today is, again, going to kick off this kind of series that we're going to do with very practical questions that have come in from people just like you, volunteer youth workers on the front lines of ministry. And I want to say before we get into the conversation that you can actually access through the show notes a way to drop in your own questions. So if you want to add to this particular series, you can still do that. But also, if you're listening and you are like, oh, I might have something to add add to some of these conversations. You can also take a look at the show notes because we've got a way for you to speak into some of the challenges that we've got coming up that we'll be releasing on future episodes. And so again, we'd love to hear the wisdom of the whole community. And so if you want to drop us, we'll be able to take either an audio clip or even just something written out. If you want to answer some of the questions, you can access the upcoming conversations in the show notes. So that would be great. But Sid, to kick us off today, we've got a question that came in from Pam. Pam is a wonderful youth worker and has got this really, I think, critical question. It brings me back to like my first year of being a youth pastor. So I was a vocational on-staff youth pastor. And this idea of what do you do when some students negatively influence other students in your group? What do you do when some students negatively influence other students in your group? Have you ever had that happen in your ministry?
Come on, dude. Listen, I know we want to get to the story, but let me just say this right up front. Hey, if you do effective youth ministry is probably going to get messy for you. And I think that's something that we sometimes don't think about. Like as we start creating these environments that are really safe, Jesus-centered environments that are invitational to other people, we get all sorts of kids that are going to start showing up. They're going to start sharing their stuff. They're going to bring their stuff. And all of a sudden, it's going to become complex. So I think, Jared, the one thing I just want to say is that just because your ministry starts getting messy, complex, maybe a little difficult, doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. It might actually mean you're doing something right. And now you've just got this deeper place that you find yourself in that you're going to have to ask God for wisdom to work out in terms of how to continue to be faithful. So have I ever had kids in my ministry that have been difficult? Yeah. In fact, even now, Jared, like we're working with Green Bay Bible Camp, and so I'm helping oversee the staffing, and we'll have staff come in, young staff come in that we want to have in our community that all of a sudden begin to like negatively impact our community. And we're wondering, oh man, like we want this to be a safe place for everyone to come, grow, and develop. But actually this is no longer like a safe place. And not only for like our community, but actually for that individual as well. And it becomes really difficult and hard. And now you're making some tough decisions and having hard conversations. And man, does it ever require wisdom to work through these processes as well.
Yeah, well, obviously on the low end, like people influence people. And so you gather a group of people together and you're going to have one student that maybe on the low end of this kind of spectrum is just a negative, like a Debbie Downer, sort of the people named Debbie. But like, they bring just the vibes down in your ministry. And then, as Pam kind of shares and you've maybe seen this, like, hey, there's a student that, does a little bit of drugs. And so they come in, they're, learn about Jesus, but then they're also offering drugs to people in your ministry. And then, all sorts of things around that range of things. And what I remember happening is in particular, and this was, 15 years ago, but the very, first couple of months of my ministry and parents that were coming and they're saying, hey, my kid learned a new swear word at youth group. And they were then presenting that as a problem because here they are trying to raise their kid a certain way, disciple their kid in following Jesus. And this kid is like, well, no, they use this word at youth group. And so you've got that kind of stuff happening. And then there's also youth workers that are hearing this and you're like, maybe you're in more of like this community youth ministry side of things. And you're of course so excited to see some of these kids that are coming in off, from maybe tougher backgrounds and they're bringing their stuff and you're like, but we have to be the place where anybody and everybody can show up. And so there's these two kind of realities, right? People that are kind of frustrated if their kids are being exposed to things that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. And then there's the opportunity to influence for the better, but still these kids that are coming in with tough situations. And so what do you do when you've got that reality in your ministry as a volunteer? What are you supposed to do with that?
Hey, Jared, let me just say this right off the bat. We have a responsibility to love all kids. But can I be really clear that all programs won't necessarily be for all kids? And I think it's really okay for us to get that clear in our minds. And the third part I want to say is that we won't be able to invest in all kids. So I think there's those three things that are just right up front. We're limited, we're finite, our programs are limited and finite. We've got to trust that. And we have to trust that Jesus is at work beyond us in ways that we're not always aware or understanding. But so when I'm thinking about this, Jared, and I'm thinking about like my volunteers especially, I think one of the first things is actually understanding like who we are as a community in that program space. So for me, what's really important is I'm asking the question, what is this like program and this community in this program actually about? What are we there for? And of course, I think for many of us in a youth ministry, we think about ourselves as being there to disciple kids, to help them grow in their love for Jesus and love for other people. And that is really intentional with what we're trying to do in that space. Now, here's what I think this means for a volunteer. And again, Jerry, you're going to you're going to clarify a couple of things that we'll have to backtrack on. But as a volunteer, you have a responsibility to actually know what the purpose is for your gathering. And you should get that information from whoever's point, whether it's like if let's say you're a volunteer that doesn't have a paid youth worker in your organization, you're getting that from whoever is like the supervisor or responsible for what's taking place underneath that. That's great. Or if you are the point person, you got to clarify, okay, what is this actually about? I think that's really important for us to clarify and understand what that is. Once you know that, if you're going to volunteer in that space, you have to be committed to that purpose. And so I think that's the first thing to get right, because that's going to help us really evaluate how we work with the various kids that are entering that community or a part of it. I think that's really important to just clarify, hey, what is the purpose for what we're about when we gather?
Yeah, and we have to give them maybe some handles on what that could look like. But I think as a principal, I think that makes a lot of sense, because obviously if you're holding a hockey practice and a kid shows up with a soccer ball and they want to play soccer on the ice, you're like, no, we don't actually do that here. And if you're only here and you're only interested in playing soccer, then we're going to have to ask you to exit the ice and go find a different place to play soccer. It's not that you can't play soccer, it's just that that's not what we're doing here. So I mean, that's an easier example, obviously, because it's so clear. And so our ministries will be a little bit more nuanced. But you mentioned, Sid, like, for example, one thing could be, okay, the discipleship of kids. This is a program that disciples kids. So if kids are showing up and they're not interested in being discipled, or they're pushing back on that, or they're not interested in that, then are you saying we might have to ask them not to attend or not to be there?
Yeah, here's what I'm always wrestling with, Jer. If my purpose is to help kids grow in their love for Jesus and love for others, that's the purpose of our gathering when we come together. I can have people show up that aren't necessarily committed to that purpose, but they're exploring. And I think that's wonderful. What I can't have is someone who is actively trying to deconstruct that purpose in that setting, or where they're actively drawing others away from what our purpose is. Like they're intentional and proactively making that work. That for me is like is a non-starter in terms of being present in that space. So I think it's really, really important for us to be able to understand what that is. And then, by the way, there's something here that's important, Jerry. Like when I have someone coming into that space, I'm asking myself a couple of questions about that individual when I'm becoming frustrated by them. I'm asking myself the question, hey, are they like malicious? Are they intentionally trying to either deconstruct this space or move others from the purpose of it? Or are they unintentionally? They're not malicious, but they don't know what they're doing, and it's actually hindering our ability to lean into our purpose. And the way I handle those two things might be quite different as well, to be honest with you.
Okay, so let's use a really prime example. You got a student who's shown up to your ministry. They've been coming for maybe just 4 weeks, but as Pam mentions, like they're negatively influencing the other students. And the way that they might be doing that is they're coming in. They've got bad language. That's an easy giveaway. They're kind of pitting students against each other, and they're they're dragging the culture down. Hey, this small group time is really lame. I don't like it. Let's get out to playing sports or whatever, and like not paying attention during the talk. That's kind of like the standard bad behavior in a youth ministry. So 100%. Here's a kid who is kind of actively pulling away from things. They might be a little bit malicious, and so and I'm just thinking, I've got youth leaders. I remember like in my ministry, volunteer youth workers who were like, Jeremy, if you just remove that one student, the rest of the students have a dramatically better experience. So why can't we just remove that one student? And that becomes the question. What do you do now? You've got this kind of clarification of your culture, but a student is kind of in the middle there of deconstructing it. What does that look like, Sid?
Yeah, for me, what that looks like is I'm trying to get to a one-on-one with that student now, right? Because I actually want to understand what's going on for that student when they're entering that space. And so I want to get to a one-on-one conversation if I can. Again, you have to work within your child protection policies, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe as a volunteer, this is what the point leader needs to do. In your environment, you might be able to turn that over to the point leader to take that young person out and just help understand. Hey, help me understand, when you come to our youth ministry, what do you think this time is for? Okay, so here's what I've observed. Can I just ask why that's happening, or how do you think that affects other people? So we're helping to create some clarity or understanding there. And if the person is also goes, oh, I didn't mean that's actually not what I want to see happen, then that's like, awesome, no problem. Well, here's a way for us to change that so this can be super positive or good for other people. But if the person continuously goes, hey, I don't really care about that, now we're going to change and we're going to move to another place. What you're going to do is once you've clarified to understand why the behavior is taking place and what their intent is behind that, we want to re-clarify again, well, this is actually how we function when we're in this space. And if a person has no desire to try to align their behavior with what you have defined as really important for that space, then you're going to have to ask the question, well, maybe this actually isn't a space for you to come to. You have lots of other spaces that could be really good for that person. Maybe you know of another program that fits what they're looking for, or maybe as an organization, you actually have another program time that better fits for what you're organized for, but you're looking at making some difficult decisions in terms of what that young person is actually invited into or where we want to direct that young person to go.
Okay. So let me back up, and I'm going to I'll try and, give some real good handles for everybody to hear this, right? But I just want to know, what are some other potential cultures? So kind of the first thing, Sid, that you're advocating for is you're noticing as a volunteer, maybe there's a disconnect. You got students who are, and this is kind of funny that this is where we go. Like, this may not be intuitive, but you got students who are negatively influencing other students. You're first asking your question, okay, what is actually the point of our gathering, the purpose? What's our culture? And so you initially said, hey, one example is, we're here to disciple students. What are some other potential cultures or purposes that we've seen in youth ministries, just because other people might have other ones, and that would change this whole thing?
Yeah, so maybe you're gathering just to have a fun exercise in community where you're accepted. So you're playing ball hockey. Maybe that's what it is. And if a young person keeps showing a safe space for kids to be together and have fun, that's a real thing and it's appropriate. But if you have a young person that comes over and starts fights every single time, every week that you're doing your ball hockey drop-in, at some point you're going to go to the young person and say, hey, this actually, what we don't do here is we don't fight. Like, we come here, we create safety for others. That's part of who we are. We don't bully, we don't attack. And this is what's consistently happening. And you know what? I'm going to give you one warning because I want to clarify who we are and what we're about. I want to find out if there's something I can help you with here, if you'd like to change your behavior in this space. But if not, then I'm afraid we can't have you, because that's not what this is about. Now, if you're running a boxing club, for kids to come in and learn how to box, maybe that's going to be a fantastic place for that young person to go to. And she's going to have a great time going there, getting some aggression out in a new type of safe environment. And that's going to be wonderful for her. So come to like Wednesday night drop-in boxing club. That would be great for you to do.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's good. I'm also thinking, like you kind of mentioned, even just a generic drop-in. We've got some youth ministries that they're trying to create a safe place for students just to be. And so a drop-in center experience with a very loose program element, like, again, that's a different kind of purpose, a different kind of gathering. And so you just understand that. You mentioned discipleship. Back in the day, like, sometimes you might have gatherings that are centered around doing ministry or serving other people, and so that's what this gathering's about. Sometimes it is just about fellowship for the sake of being together. Sometimes it is a gathering for the purpose of evangelism. So hey, this is a place for us to be able to tell people about Jesus, but we're hoping that they come without faith. So understanding the purpose and kind of nuancing that can get us there. And then I heard you also talking not just about the purpose, but then about some of the community guidelines or the rules that we might say are important for our particular ministry. Did you ever have, Sid, like a couple of key rules that you would use in your youth ministry that people can take as a handle?
Yeah, we would always say that we're going to be in an environment that's a really respectful environment. So we said we want to respect God and His way for us in this space. We want to respect each other, and we want to respect the building that we're in. And then we really defined what it meant by respect. So especially when it came to respecting each other, we just said, hey, one of our guidelines is when someone's speaking, we don't speak over them. We don't purposefully hurt others or put them in unsafe spaces. Like, we just defined what respect for each other meant, and then we defined what respect for the building meant and how we would function, if something got broken, et cetera, et cetera. So we just needed to clarify what we were looking for in those spaces and what we meant by respect. So for us, that was really important. Essentially what we're doing, Jer, like when we're at camp, bringing on campers or young staff, we call it a code of conduct. This is just how you conduct yourself when you're in our space with us. That's how this works. You don't even have to believe what we believe. This is just how you're going to conduct yourself when you're in this space.
Yep. So yeah, being able to communicate that and making it as simple as possible. It's not a list of 10 rules.
Totally.
It's a couple of clear handles. Hey, when a leader speaks to you, you respond to them. Like, whatever you decide as a bit of a handle, that creates the little bit of, again, the expectation. So you're clarifying a bit of the purpose, that culture, what it means to be in this community, and that's maybe a couple of meetings. Like, it might take a little bit of time, actually. Like, there might be
100%.
disagreement. You might have other volunteers that are like, no, like, this is a space for anybody and everybody to come and to feel comfortable. comfortable. And then another leader's like, no, like we have to make sure that we get to have deep spiritual conversations. And if somebody's not willing to have a deep spiritual conversation, we have to exit them. And then once you have that information, it allows you then to help students clarify and help them decide if they want to opt into your experience. So that's where, after clarifying that culture, you said the second thing is when you notice, okay, now we have students who are negatively impacting another student, negative influence, and we can clarify what that means and why that doesn't fit with our culture. Now you go to that individual that's causing the grief. You have that one-on-one conversation, and you see if there's a way to help them become a part of the community. Now, go ahead, Sid. You're going to jump in, but then I want to ask you what to do when a student is clearly not able to be a part of that community.
Okay, why don't we go to that question actually? What do we do if they're not? There's a couple of things that I think about there, Jared. Number one, again, we have a responsibility to be loving towards all people, and we want to lead all people towards Jesus. It might not be this programmed environment that's going to be accessible for that young individual. We might not have the resources to actually help that young individual. Jared, I had multiple times when I had kids that had like certain things they were wrestling with. Maybe it was due to past experiences, could be due to a whole bunch of different things. And we just actually didn't have the resources to be helpful for them. So we couldn't commit to a safe environment for our other kids, nor could we commit to a safe environment for that young individual. So part of what we needed to do, what we wanted to do was try to find a place where that young person actually could be safe and could grow. This is where, if I'm a volunteer, I'm going to go to my point leader. I'm going to express what's taking place and saying, hey, do we know any other organizations that could actually create a better place for this young person to be a part of community? And we look to partner and we look to connect dots and invite kids to other spaces that could actually work for them in a healthier and a better way. This might also mean, by the way, Jared, that some of our volunteer leaders might say, oh, I have a real heart for a kid that's going through that kind of an experience. I'm going to remove myself from this program so I can put my time into either a relationship with that young person or into a different type of program that I can better serve that young person. And that's completely okay as well. Like, I think that's really fantastic. The point we want to make sure is we understand that every program is not always for every kid. Each kid gets to decide if they want to be a part of that program or not, and there has to be some of those boundaries. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing, Jared, that's really important is we want to find out for a young person, like, who is that person's guardian or caregiver? And part of what I want to do is try to have a conversation with that individual as well. Now, again, volunteer youth worker, you may not have the time or the resources. Let's say if you're a grade 12 volunteer youth worker, you're probably not going out for coffee with a young person's parent to have that conversation. That's where you have to go up the ladder in your organization to get the person who's above you and allow them to start processing that experience with that guardian or caregiver. Because we really want to try, again, if it's possible for us to have that person in the community and for it to be healthy for them, great. And if not, we want to say, how can we continue to support and help by finding another place that's going to be better? And so again, I think it's important to try to go up in that way as well.
Yeah, so chatting with a parent, guardian, that sort of thing, I think is very worthwhile. I think it's worthwhile telling the student ahead of time, hey, in light of the fact that it doesn't look like you want to be a part of our environment. I'm thinking of a dozen of these kinds of conversations that I've had. Hey, it seems like when you exit our small group time, or when you run away, or when you do these kinds of things, it's like you don't want to be here. So I'm going to have a conversation with your parent or your guardian. This is what I'm going to tell them. Is there anything you want to add to the conversation? Brilliant. Is there anything that you would rather say? Do you want to change how this interaction happens? And then have that conversation with the parent. And again, it's very low. Like, I'm not, if I'm going to have as a point leader, it's very low on the emotional level. I'm not intense about this.
Totally.
I'm not upset about this, because I get, and this is where, again, you're communicating that not every environment is for every particular kid. And so it's a little bit almost like I'm apologetic. Hey, I wish that we could host your student, but it's just seemingly clear and obvious that they're not interested. Now, a lot of times parents in those settings, if they recognize their student has been a negative influence in other settings, they might be apologetic. They might want to try and make it work. And then you can have that conversation. That's not an issue. Hey, maybe there's a better way to approach this. But the goal, again, is to again, protect the culture, and then also to make sure that you offer ideas for this particular kid so that they can still have what your ministry is offering, maybe in a different place.
And Jared, can I just say this? Like, we're not actually about protecting an institution. We're about protecting people. When we use the language culture, we just speak about a way of relating to each other. And there's just specific ways that we relate to each other and relate to God in that space. And that's what we're guarding because we care about people. We don't just care about a culture or an institution. Now, here's, I think,
Well,
Jared.
and if I can jump,
Go ahead.
like, because I think the hockey example is sometimes maybe a helpful one, even though it's a little simplistic. Like,
Sure.
there's a point to gathering to play hockey, and if people don't want to play hockey, we're not upset or mad at them.
No.
And so our ministry has a purpose and a goal, and it's not like just this wide open, wide spanning thing. No, that we actually have some really specific things. At least in the ministries that I was, it was usually around small groups, especially. So we'd have kids that would come in and they'd say, "Hey, I hate the small group time." To which I would say, "I'm sorry. The reason we gather is for the small group time. And so if you don't want to be in the small group, the rest of our program is just to serve the small group time. And so you can't just show up and do everything else except for the small group time. This is what we're here for." And so clarifying that, making sure people understand that, allows people then to make decisions. Oh, I don't want to play hockey. I want to go play soccer. No problem. We'll miss you. And we'll still try to find ways of opting more and more people in. But we're clear on what we're trying to do.
Now, Jared, I think that there's a bigger problem here sometimes that we wrestle with. And I think this is the question behind the question, right? So we have young people that are showing up at our ministry and their code of conduct fits. They do really well. But they're engaged in personal practices that are like self-destructive, hurtful for others. And just by their presence or the relationships they begin to build in our community, they're starting to invite other kids from our community into those like self-destructive practices or embracing values that don't align with faith or our families. Jared, that's another level of complexity that we wrestle with.
So yeah, let's wrap up our time by walking through this other side of the question. So just to clarify, when students are negatively influencing others, we're going to understand and clarify our own purpose of our culture, of our gathering. What are we trying to do here? When students are clearly, the negative influence is clear and obvious. This is not what we want to have happen in this environment. So we have that one-on-one. We might get to talk with that student's parents. But now the other side is that when you realize, oh, actually, yes, I know there's been a few extra curse words in our environment, but these students are exploring Christ and their understanding of behavior is different than maybe these other church kids. And so now we actually have to, instead of going to the kids that seem to be having the negative influence, now we're going to the kids that might be influenced by these kids and their parents. How do you have the conversation to say to a parent, actually, we're going to continue to have curse words in our gathering, and we want you to be okay with it, and we still want your student to be here, even though they might still be a little bit negatively influenced, but let's help disciple through it. What's the conversation there?
And dude, it's hard, but it's not much different than the other conversation. We're kind of redefining or reclarifying who we're going to be as a culture, like who's invited in, who's welcome. And we're actually going to try to show a way forward that kids could actually thrive in that space. And if we can get parents on board with a way forward that aligns with who we are and who Jesus is calling us to be in that specific space, then we're winning. We're going to equip, we're going to train, we're going to resource for that to be able to happen. On the flip side, unfortunately, there is a real possibility that some of our other kids will say, well, I don't think that that's where I want to be now. Or parents will say, I don't want my kids to be there. And again, I want to be really careful before you go here. You have to make sure you're aligned with the vision of those who you're serving under, right? Like you got to be really clear on that because there's others on the other side that might opt out. Now, I do want to say this. I think that what's really important is that, we are a teaching, like if you're involved in youth ministry, our goal is to help the next generation know Jesus. So we're teaching. We're always teaching. We're asking the Holy Spirit to come and do powerful, transforming work in the lives of our kids. And so we're inviting all of our kids into a better way. And then when we see individuals struggling, we want to go to the individuals and invite them into a better Jesus way. So in the same way that we might go one-on-one with a young person who's like deconstructing our culture, we also will want to find the kids who are struggling and go to them and say, hey, I see you. I love you. You know differently, and I want to invite you into a better way. And I want to support you in that and come alongside you. And one of the questions, Jared, that I used to ask my boys all the time is I just ask them the question. I say, hey, listen, are you leading others and showing them a better way, or are you being led by others into a way that's actually not better? And so again, I'm doing a deeper level of discipleship with that individual as well. And I'm inviting parents to come on board that journey with me when I can.
Yeah, I love that. So, so clarifying the culture, and then these one-on-one conversations with those that might be negatively influencing students, and those that might be negatively influenced by other students. Yeah. Let's care for both of them. This sounds like it's going to be a ton of work. So let me just maybe make this a little bit more straightforward. If you're a volunteer youth worker, this is like could be a 5-minute conversation during hang time with each of these kids, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a check-in. Hey, you saw that kid that had been around for a while, and hey, they got some new language or they've got some new attitude. You're checking in with them. It's a 5-minute convo, right before the game start or right as things are wrapping up. This isn't meant to be 7 counseling sessions with each set of people.
So good, bro.
But it is, I think, really worthwhile to kind of catch that. But if it gets elevated, by all means, involve your point leader. Have conversations with parents and guardians on both sides of it, and just be able to be clear on this is what we're here to do, and we want to make sure that all students understand that so that they can opt in. I want to. You say your thing. I want to tell one story, and then you'll wrap us up.
Yeah. Just one thing I want to say is we can be shocked by how a quick word can really change the direction of a young person's journey, like really shocked by it. But all I needed was that one leader to come to me and, hey, Sid, that language you're using, like, honestly, that's not caring for other people and doesn't reflect who you are. I know that about you. I want to say that, there's a better way that God has for you. It's amazing how that 1-2-minute conversation can have a profound impact on a young person's direction. So don't ignore that nudging when the Spirit leads you to kind of lean in, and don't think that it's not significant just because, like you said, it's not like the 7-session counseling journey. Like that one conversation can make a powerful difference. So let's lean into the moments and trust that the Spirit's going to use those in really powerful ways. Okay, Jeremy, go ahead. Give us your last story.
So caveat, I've asked plenty of students to disengage and to not come to our community because they weren't abiding by our kind of community guidelines or our idea of what we're accomplishing. But I've also had students that seemed like they were communicating, and sometimes maybe even from a family perspective, that they were too mature for this gathering. Hey, this gathering has got a lot of immature people. That's oftentimes the language you might hear. And so I'm looking for the most mature discipleship. And so I want to disengage because this is no longer a mature gathering. I just want to tell you one angle that I've offered to families and even to students in those kinds of situations. I think that it's usually a sign of immaturity to want to disengage from community where you could offer a positive influence over somebody. So oftentimes when students say, I'm too mature for this gathering, it's actually a really clear sign that they're not quite mature enough, because as a volunteer, you kind of see this. You've opted in and entered into these spaces with people that aren't Christians, people that don't know how to behave in group settings, and you're there to help guide and shepherd and lead them. And for your most mature students, they should be able to see how their involvement can be a service to the bigger kingdom purposes of your ministry. And so oftentimes when students start to struggle and they're maybe being influenced or they don't like to be a part of the gathering, I would like to try to help call them to this higher thing where actually your maturity in your faith is most on display when you can go into the deep end and do the evangelism and discipleship work with even your peers. And that's hard and that's difficult, but that's where I think students' faith will grow the most. And so if you can call them out to that, that's fun. And obviously that's a bit of a struggle, and still you have to deal with the nuances and the parents that are wrestling with things. But let's stick with it and let's try our best to have environments where students can explore and experience faith.
So good.
Sid, any last words before we wrap up?
No, dude, so good. Hey, we just really appreciate volunteers. We know what you do is not easy. It's complex. And I just want to say thank you. Stay the course, stay in it. You make an eternal difference, and we sure appreciate what you do.
Check things out in the show notes. And like we said, bring your wisdom to the table, because we've got lots of questions that we'll be tackling over the next few weeks, and would love you to either speak to them or to add to the list. So check that out in the show notes, and we'll see you next time for another conversation here on the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast.